Soundstripe. 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 Soundstripe.
Hey, Bardu, ¿cómo estás, man? Aquí estoy en los estados. Estoy viviendo aquí en Texas, San Antonio. Too bad I didn't see you while I was in Germany, Bardi. But next time. Next time I'll catch you there. All right, everyone, we're getting ready for another live digital kava session here on the Polynesian Eyes podcast. Lone Ranger today will be myself, Tua Fale, and so we'll give a couple more minutes and we'll get the show started.
Soundstripe.
Actually, I guess we better get, I didn't complete the Instagram live. We'll do that in the background.
Soundstripe. Soundstripe.
All right, we'll get this going. Talofa Malolere, and welcome everyone to another live digital kava session here on the Polynesian Eyes podcast. It has been a busy 2 weeks. It's been a while since we've had a live digital kava session here, and a lot of things have happened since our last time together. So we're going to cover a few things that have happened since our last episode. And we're going to start with Uncle Donald. Obviously, here in the United States, elections were held and Uncle Donald was able to come out with the victory here. And so he is going to be the 47th president of the United States of America. And so, as you guys all may know, we're fans of Uncle Donald here. And so he is bringing in a new team. There is an exciting correlation with Polynesians on this new team that's going on, and we're going to start by reviewing what exactly that new team is. Let's see here. We're having a little bit of a technical difficulty here. All right, there we go. Let's see here. We'll share. Let's react to this video real quick to get us started.
Tulsi Gabbard.
Aloha. I joined the Democratic Party over 20 years ago. I was 21 years old in Hawaii, and at that time, we welcomed people from all different backgrounds, different views, celebrated free speech, and actually defended those whose speech was being attacked, even if they disagreed with their views. It was a party that stood up for the little guy and represented our values of freedom and liberty in America. I left the Democrat Party because now it stands for the exact opposite of all of those things.
Free speech is not an absolute.
Social media sites, they are speaking to millions of people without oversight or regulation, and that has to stop.
I never would have imagined as an American and as a soldier that we would live in a country in my lifetime where we would feel like we have to self-censor what we say, that we couldn't criticize our own government for fear of them labeling us as a domestic terrorist. We are closer to the brink of World War III and nuclear war today than we ever have been before, directly because of the Harris-Biden administration's foreign policy. Too many Americans are struggling just to afford the basic necessities of life. No matter how many times we've heard Kamala Harris and Joe Biden over these last 4 years tout and celebrate how Bidenomics has been great for America,
America's economy is strong.
Polls consistently show that a majority of the American people disapprove of the president's handling of the economy.
Guess what? It's working.
Over half of Americans earning a six-figure salary report that they're actually living paycheck to paycheck. Bidenomics is working. It is actually working.
The number of homeless people on the streets and in shelters across the U.S. increased significantly this year.
Bidenomics is working.
it's almost as though they're speaking from an ivory tower, saying how great they are and patting themselves on the back, while people are struggling for crumbs on the streets. This election really isn't about the left versus the right. It's about choosing, we the people choosing our government and the choice between freedom versus tyranny.
The Department of Defense under Biden's authority quietly codified its right to deploy lethal force against its own citizens on American soil.
I'm proud to endorse Donald Trump in this election because he is our best hope. Specifically because of the leadership that President Trump has brought to transform the Republican Party and bring it back to the party of the people, the party of equality, the party that was founded to fight against and end slavery in this country. It is the party of common sense and the party that is led by a president who has the courage and strength to fight for peace.
Mr. Trump became the first sitting U.S. president to ever set foot inside North Korea yesterday.
And this is why they will do everything possible to try to destroy him. Because this man has the courage to take them on and root out the deep rot of corruption in Washington. My message to my fellow Americans, regardless of your political affiliation, now is the time for us to stand together to save our country. A vote for President Trump is a vote for a big open tent party that welcomes people from all backgrounds and all walks of life. A vote for President Trump is a vote to express our deep love for our country and our appreciation for our God-given rights and freedoms enshrined in the Constitution. A vote for President Trump is a vote for secure borders and safe communities, and a vote for President Trump is a vote for peace here in America and around the world. Thank you so much.
So obviously, I mean, it's the video was a little bit longer than I anticipated here, but what makes this interesting and related to the podcast is specifically that Tulsi Gabbard is she's a Polynesian woman, and she has just not only this whole, support with Donald Trump and with this wave and changing and having an impact on the election itself, but also being, as the video here shows, she's been selected as the nominee for Director of National Intelligence. That's a big deal. I mean, I think if she were to get this nomination, she would be a Polynesian that has reached the highest levels of political influence in the United States so far. We've been able to, get into sports. We've been getting into entertainment. We've been getting into a lot of different things, but she really is the trailblazer on the political side and really having an impact in that area. Hey, Slick Rick, Malo, appreciate the comment there and for stopping by. It's been a while. Malo. So really, that becomes something really important for us to accomplish as we work through these things. So yeah, with that being said, it's a pretty exciting thing to see her success and see the growth that she's having there. So really is cool to see Polynesians starting to make waves in all aspects of American culture, obviously with Uncle Donald there, and Tulsi Gabbard joining in her support. That allows Polynesians now into a new realm of politics in the United States. So that's something related, Polynesian related to the election that just happened here. The next one that happened is the Matemaatonga Games and the Pacific Championships that happened over the weekend. I mean, obviously, this had huge impact on the game and of the sport itself. There are a couple videos here I wanted to walk through, just to kind of get some feedback and some responses to some of the social media findings and discussion to what just happened here.
The Tongan fans, they're the MVP of the Pacific nations, like
without a doubt.
Without a doubt, the way he showed up.
I might go one further. I'd say they are the best supporters this side of the world.
Oh, hold on. I mean, I know a lot of my Samoan friends have, they've already got hurt feelings just how much fun that you see.
Nah, I reckon we call a spade a spade. The Tongan fans are far more passionate and back their team.
Do not need to do this.
I think they're incredible.
I think in the next World Cup, it is going to be Tonga versus New Zealand in the final.
Hell yeah.
My point to this is we get our best players back for Kiwis, and you don't have old dogs running the cutter. All right? No 34-year-old me in there pulling the strings. We get the boys back in there, right? The Kiwis are in such a good place, boys. Like, honestly, that environment, that culture led by Fish is as good a culture I've ever been a part of. It was the best 3 weeks to be a part of it. So that's why New Zealand's going to be there. Why Tonga's going to be there? Isaiah Katoa, their halfback. Tonga has always had the power. They've always had the one-on-one ability to be flair. But now they're getting a halfback come through who can put the ball in good spots and build pressure. So you give them another 2 years, we're talking here. Another full season of NRL, another 2 full seasons of NRL. You watch him go about his work at the next World Cup. With that forward pack, with those outside backs, they're going to be a real problem.
I mean, very, very interesting. I don't think it's even close, in my opinion, to have a debate as to whether there is a more passionate, more, engaged fan base than the Matemaatonga fan base. I don't even think it's close. I don't even think it's worth even having a discussion as to who could potentially be in second place, because the gap is just so huge. I mean, it's undeniable when you look at what the Red Sea does when they have the games and what they do to show up. I mean, they had basically sold out games wherever they go. I don't even think it's close. I mean, to me, it's kind of foolish to consider anything else from anyone to say, oh yeah, hey, Mr. Aotearoa, happy Sabbath in New Zealand. Question here from Mr. Aotearoa: what can Trump do to assist our elections to be fair and secure? Because Harris won the states who don't need photo ID or citizenships to vote. Fair question, right? I mean, everybody basically on Donald Trump's side of the fence said there needed to be such a huge red wave that even the fraud that could and does happen could be overrun. So really what it'll come down to is there's going to be some changes that have to happen in IDs. And I think that's the biggest part that's going to probably have to happen there. And right now he's putting all the people in the right spots. Mr. Aotearoa, in my opinion, putting in Matt Gaetz at Attorney General. I think putting all these people that are aligned, and now that they have the House and they have the Senate, they've got to make that a priority, right? And then also taking care of the border and making sure that really is something that gets addressed is going to be critical. But fair question there, Mr. Aotearoa. So, kind of coming back, I mean, I think it's kind of funny that they would even consider anything else besides Tonga for the red wave, and who are the most passionate fans out there, and the what game gives the best experience, right? And let's just pull up this for now, and then this is really, to me, what kind of solidifies that, right? It says here now, this is the article here from the NRL, And it's basically saying crowds, ratings, highlight passion for international game. And they're only having this conversation because what Tonga has brought to the table, right? The rugby league scene was pretty much almost 90% NRL, right? 5% maybe the European rugby league competition, and then the other 5% was the World Cup, the international stage. I mean, it was down to the point where you could even look here, like Mal Meninga here talking, like it was almost like a kind of a distraction to coach the Kangaroos and to go out and do the international game, because it was just down to Australia 80% of the time to win, New Zealand the other 15, and then maybe someone from Europe to make a difference. But when you have the passion that happens like right here, when Tonga plays, and the impact that has, and the eyeballs, the rating. So this article talks about, it's not just talking about people showing up to the game. The ratings were off the chart because of this kind of experience you can get when you tune in. Look at that. Look at the Red Sea in the background. This is what really is changing the conversation on the international level for rugby league. It's crazy. Look at that. This is in Sydney, but there's more red than anywhere else. Look at the noise. I mean, I don't think that there's any doubt. I mean, that's what's really crazy about this. They're saying here the passion is huge. The Pacific Championships had 34,000 at Suncorp, at sellout at Christchurch, nearly a sellout in Auckland, and a sellout in Sydney. So we really don't need to see any more evidence of that. And when we're speaking about sellout, it's Tonga is directly the driver behind that. I mean, it is phenomenal what was been able to accomplish through the rugby league with the Pacific Championship. So right here, some of the statistics. The 2024 Pacific Championships delivering record-breaking attendance and viewership with a total audience of 6.2 million across all tournaments, marking a significant 40% year-over-year increase. The Pacific Cup final between Australia and Tonga drawing 1 million viewers, a 79%. 79% increase on the 2023 decider between the Kangaroos and the Kiwis. I mean, that is the red wave in full effect right there. That is the excitement that Tonga is generating at that level. And the fact that also the younger players are also following through that wave, it's impacting the Toa Samoa are getting younger players in their prime going there, also to Fiji. So this is a multiplying effect across the board. Hey, Teke Tonga, Malo, welcome to the Digital Live Kava session here. Feel free, anyone that's watching in on Facebook, YouTube, X, Patreon, feel free to make a comment. We can respond and address any questions that come around. But welcome everyone. Dropping down here, the Kangaroos versus Kiwis test in Christchurch, attracting 545,000 viewers on FTA and nearly 1 million views across all platforms, surpassing last year's corresponding match by 22%. So we're even seeing an increase there and exceeding both Bledisloe Cup fixtures earlier this year. So, I mean, rugby union's getting shellackings, man. I mean, the excitement and the energy on the international level for rugby league that is driven by the Pacific and Polynesian nations, it's just really crazy. The 28,728 crowd for the final at Combank Stadium being the biggest for a test in Sydney since 2008. Right? More than 4,000 Kangaroo jerseys being sold during the Pacific nation. So it's, I mean, average viewership for men's Pacific Bowl matches rising by, so across the board, the impact that the Polynesian and Pacific nations are having on international rugby league, undeniable. And the biggest part behind that is obviously the impact that Tonga has had. And it really just, in many ways, it comes down to what Jason Taumalolo and Andrew Fifita brought to the table when they started this, right? I mean, it really was that those initial and critical decisions made by Jason Taumalolo and by Andrew Fifita that really started this. You remove those two critical decisions, and we don't have this massive impact on rugby league that now everyone is benefiting from, right? And so let's pull up another quick video here. There's one that I was trying to save here to really kind of have a conversation and talk about. Let's see here if I can pull it up real quick. So this is some of the predictions, obviously, before the game. And we'll just kind of listen to the commentary. Obviously, we know Australia won, but listen to how different the conversation is from any other time in history of when the Kangaroos would have played Tonga, right? And the conversations that are happening on that game. Oh, dang. Looks like we're having some technical difficulties there. We're not getting the sound through, it sounds like. Dang it. Well, so basically what they're talking about here, Teke, is all of them all predicted a very close match, right? A very close match that was going to happen. And they knew that Tonga was going to make it tough for Australia. They had a slight advantage. Oh, you know what? I know why. Because I muted it on this other. Let's try that again, Teke. Appreciate the heads up on that.
Really like what Tonga have done over the past couple of seasons, and look.
Let me know if there's no sound coming through, but I
leaning towards a tight Australian victory. I think what Tonga have in their favor is that this is a team that have been together for such a long time now. Like they've got young Izzy Katoa steering them around. Like they've got a great forward pack. We know that's their strength, and they know how to play to their strength. They've got a great coach in Christian Wolf, who knows the group extremely well. They've got so much passion and pride. I'm expecting there to be thousands upon thousands of Tongan fans at Suncorp Stadium. Like playing in front of those Tongan fans was my favorite ever international memory, the best crowd that I've ever played at.
Listen to that. This is a guy who's been to Rugby League World Cup final, played against the Kangaroos, played against the Kiwis at the highest level. And he says it's not even close. He says his number one international atmosphere is playing against Tonga. That is why we're seeing these significant increases in the Pacific Nations Cup in interest in International Rugby League. That is what Tonga started, and that Samoa and Fiji and other nations, and you could Papua New Guinea's in there as well. That is where all the excitement's coming from. The players on the field feel it, the viewers feel it, and it's just spreading like wildfire.
Wow.
Without question.
That's disappointed me as well. Like you've
played
had
at Old
crazy,
Trafford, played at Wembley. Nothing beats playing in front of those
Wow.
Tongan
Look at
fans.
that.
They
That's
are
mad.
incredible.
Yeah.
They really are. But I just think with Australia, they'll just have a little bit too much class in the outside backs with people like, the Hammer and Tommy Teborovich at centres. That's some talent in there. So I think they'll just have enough. And obviously, with the big lads of Tonga, big outside backs, Mitchell Moses kicking game as well. Like he's an expert with the boots. So expect them to get turned around nice and early.
Going to go Australia. People think it's going to be a big win. I don't think so. I think Australia's going to be pretty clunky. I think I'm a bit worried about the size of Tonga's pack. I know we've got a mobile pack and we're going to try and run them off the ground. I'm just a bit worried that international game will be a bit slower, and that favours the big pack of Tonga. But I do think, and obviously Moses coming back hasn't played a lot of footy, but I reckon 12 to 14 point win for Australia.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a closer game than most people think. I'm back in Australia for two reasons. One is because we are in some ways actually coming in the underdog. You know, Tonga have something to prove and play for. So I think if it was the other way around and we'd smack Tonga the last game, there'd be a little bit of fear there.
Yeah.
And I just think
when you say underdog, you just mean they beat us last time.
Yeah, exactly right. So I feel like, and that's going to play in our favor. We do actually have something to prove. So the boys will want to.
So it looks like this analysis was their projections for the first game, which ended up being relatively correct, right? And you think it was like a 12 to 18 point win for Australia, which is still relatively close historically. But when it came back to the final in the Pacific Championship, it was single possession difference, right? 6 points, and it came down to the last second. Like that was as close as a game as you would ask for any country playing in a major championship game.
To be coming into this as opposed to just red hot ridiculous favorites. And then I also think there'll be a little bit more cohesion with the Australian team based on the amount of players that have played together in Origin and stuff like that. So I think that'll get it done.
Everything with
all right, boys.
And that was to me the biggest advantage.
It's very cryptic, and so you go through like a 40-day.
Tonight.
I really like what Tonga have done over the past couple of seasons.
This real quick. There is definitely a continuity advantage that the Australians had because of a lot of their players played together, not only on same teams, but more importantly on state of origin, right? And consistently throughout the years in Australia. So there's definitely some advantages there. But I mean, the point still boils down to, you can't believe that such a small nation can have such a huge impact. So that's really what it boils down to, and what Tonga was able to accomplish in starting that movement and making that an exciting, feature of the international game it really is incredible. So I'm gonna come back here and let's see there's another video here that I wanted to it looks like an Australian fan kind of brought to the table interesting take on what he felt the impact of the Tongan fans had on the game, and from his perspective. Let's go through here and just kind of listen to this. I don't know if we'll do the whole 4 minutes because 4 minutes is a long time, but let's at least listen to the first parts of it.
In a red flannel. My actual second post today, which I usually don't do so many in a row, but I really wanted to touch base on something that's been eating at me for a little while. I don't know if everyone watches the football or not. Like, I don't mind watching the footy. Definitely not something I enjoy watching like I used to. But did anyone else notice how lucky we are that we played against Tonga at that Sydney game yesterday? Did you see that the crowd, 28,000 people, I would say 26,000 people were Tongan fans.
That's pretty funny, right? You say a capacity crowd at the stadium, 28,000 plus, and he says, yeah, I would say 26,000 of them were Tongan. Right? I mean, this is why, to me, it's not a debate who the most passionate fans are in the rugby league space. You know, you just sprinkle a little winning or a little opportunity to win, and the Tongan fans are all over that. You don't even have to win everything. You just have to give them a little sprinkle of hope, and they'll be there, right? And they'll be there in droves. Just crazy.
And that's great. Like, no disrespect whatsoever to the Tongan community in any way, because they fucking bring it. They are proud, and they are, in drones. They go out and they just love watching their boys play. And I think that's what I'm trying to get at here. We can't do that.
Yeah.
I'm Croatian, but Australian, yeah? I'm proud to be an Australian.
Yeah, so it gets a little interesting there. I mean, he's basically, I think the rest of the video, he kind of gets into, that really doesn't allow him, some political discussion in there. But really what I wanted to really focus on was how much of an impact the crowd just had on the viewers and what that allowed them to experience at a whole different level, right? And I want to kind of go back and revisit some of the storylines that led up to that, because this didn't just happen in a vacuum. It happened because people made decisions, people made choices. And I want to visit that. I want to see and kind of revisit, how did we get here? Right? And so let's start with a couple interviews here, and let's start with this one.
Australia versus Tonga, and it was one of the best crowds. But I played you guys Australia versus Tonga, and it was one of the best crowds. But you know what the best about your crowd was? They went for Australia as well.
Yeah. I heard them like sing the anthem. I was like, we don't have our anthem that's going off.
Yep.
Oh, now we're going to sing the Australian anthem. And then they're all singing that. I was like,
it's so good, mate.
All right, here we go. This is on.
But what you done for the game, for the international game, yourself and Jason Tamalalo, I don't think it gets enough credit for what you've done. Like, it's not just Tonga, it's the other ones, it's Fiji, it's it's the likes of Samoa, that players are now want to play for them instead of Australia or New Zealand.
That was the biggest thing for us, Woodsy, after that. Like, the buzz was still there. The want to verse Australia was still there.
Yep.
What we did with the fundings that we won, legitimately, we come third in the World Cup. So, we took half the money and put it up for our future for the next World Cup. We had,
it was crazy.
The rest of you got that. But it come down, it was just one of those things. Them all hearing, like, the next year, the kids were deflecting to play New Zealand schoolboys to play for.
So good.
Like Matamatanga, the junior version.
Unbelievable.
It was massive, but to top it all off, like, so don't get me wrong, they're my arch enemies with Samoa, Tonga, and that. Like, that's a Pacific Battle's biggest state of origin.
Yep.
But to see them go so far, because it was like once a Pacific nation's out, they jump on the next bandwagon.
Crazy, eh?
And that's what it is in the islands. We jump on the next one. Like, all us Tongans straight on the Samoan Bay. Everyone was going for them.
It was huge.
So I don't like being in England. They would have had a much better time if it was over here again. Yeah. But our crowds were awesome. I remember when we beat New Zealand, like, they just jerseys off, red jersey on.
It was ridiculous, wasn't it? You didn't just beat him, you thumped him.
Yeah, and just our comeback for it too.
Right throughout the match. That is just really, really cool to see, right? Let me see here. The next part here. Let's revisit this one as well.
I'm happy for you.
But that's for me. It was like one of those things. Like, why does it have to be just the big three?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you got Australia, England, New Zealand.
Yeah.
The rest of yous come take part in the World Cup, and
Boring.
then, go do your
Yes.
business. Like for us, it was so much more.
Can I say something? Look what you've done now. Look at the likes of Jerome Luai, Stephen Crichton. You know, they wouldn't be doing that if you guys. I'm telling you
I
now.
said the last World Cup when Samoa made it. Like I had a
So
moment
good.
to myself, and I was like, you know what, we had input in this.
Look, they're rivals of yours, but how happy were you to see them in the final? You know what I mean?
It was massive. But I always said I got gypped in my World Cup.
That was my next question.
Oh, bro.
100%. He scored a try on that one. It was a strip. Anyways.
So you've had a great tournament.
We had a great tournament.
England in the pre-final.
Pre-final.
In, was it Mount Smart or wherever it's called now? The moment at the end of the game.
You go to your leaders and it's a tough one for me. Because I understand like the loose carrying that.
Yep.
But I do understand of like the raking. Like I felt hand on the ball and gone.
Yep.
But to continue, and then I seen it go, and he's dropped it, and I've just taken it and scored it again.
Yep.
The worst thing for me, Woodsy, was I had a touch judge on the side. Hop heard it, Toops heard it, and he's like, I have try. And he's just gone.
Wow.
And it put questions in us like, did they not want a tier 2 nation up there? Well, like we were really humming. And if there was any team to kind of match use, I felt like it was us.
Mm-hmm.
Only because we had the forward pack to matches.
I just think the emotion.
We had the crowd, mate. Our crowd was like, I don't think you'd find any better like.
That's cool. I mean, that's just awesome. Kind of a bummer, kind of having some, flashbacks of disappointment there because of that loss. Because I still am convinced that Andrew Fifita scored a try on that. Comment here from Tati Moore, the definition of punching above our weight plus the mafana ain't no joke. And that's really what it comes back to. And I'm hoping on the tail end of a discussion here on the show, if we get to it, if the time allows, have a little bit of a discussion on how and why that is even feasible. And maybe, you know what, let's just go into it now. So in this concept about Tonga and Polynesians in general, there were two conversations that come to mind that I think would be kind of interesting in related to this, right? There was a company that I believe that was called Zacon Foods here in the U.S. and this is when I was living in Spokane, Washington, and they had a model where they would ship fresh meat, never frozen, chicken, bacon, all kinds of stuff. And they didn't have a physical store. But what they would do is they would say, hey, we're going to show up at Salt Lake at this location in 3 months. We can get you discounted meat, high quality meat. You have to buy it in bulk. And we're going to show up in this parking lot. If you make your purchases now, we'll show up in this parking lot and you show up and we'll deliver you your meat on there. And I was having some conversations with some of the advertisers there and one of the founders of the company. And I was really pitching to them that there is a demographic in the United States that punches well above their weight, kind of going along with Tatimoa's comment here in regards to food purchases and consumption and so forth. And I was telling them it was the Polynesian demographic, and in areas that they were already going to in Utah, California. And if there was a way that they could just, they don't have to change their major model, but there's also this, storage houses and units that have big freezers where you can store, bulk foods and so forth. And one of the things I was pitching to them was if you could, get these large spaces and store some of these things that these Polynesians will buy in bulk for funerals, for weddings and so forth, like lamb, like chicken, even ufitalo, whatever it is you want, and then make that readily available for bulk purchases. I told him, I said, you will be shocked at the volume of these goods being purchased in these areas where there's high density of Polynesians because there's always a funeral. There's always a birthday. There's always a church conference. There's always something going on. High school reunions from Tonga, family reunions, where people are looking to buy, their preferred Polynesian cuisine and so forth. And it's not always easy to buy in the bulk and in the quantity and at the quality that they would like. That one was one of those conversations. The other one that I remember, just kind of, going off of the same theme here of Polynesians, Tongans kind of punching above their weight. Ethereum, the cryptocurrency and blockchain technology that's out there. Back in about, I want to say 2012-ish, when they were still in the white paper phase, I met two of the founders of Ethereum. This was before they launched, a year or two before they launched in New York. Had conversations, really thought that was an interesting technology. And, at the time, the whole thinking in the cryptocurrency space was, we're just going to be 100% unregulated and we're going to do it. And I said, guys, you're going to get regulated and you need to embrace it as being accepted. It's a positive thing in many ways. But I did try to sell to them of creating first a Tongan digital currency because there was a big push and their interest was, how do we find a case in point that would allow international transactions, but also domestically in certain areas, and really kind of be a proof of concept, and then eventually proof of stake, and then execute it. And I was really, at the time, I was working on a startup, and we were working on some financial solutions for Tongans and Polynesians in Tonga, Samoa, and Fiji for purchasing products and services, and also just financial services as well. And I was really trying to work out a deal with them where they would be kind of the technology backing partner to create a digital currency for Tonga, Samoa, and Fiji that could not only be used domestically within each country, but also could be used internationally, because you go to Tonga, over 100 million a year for 100,000 people. That's really what drives the Tongan economy, with the high percentage of the trade deficit. Well, basically, what balances the trade deficit are remittances coming back to Tonga. Same thing with Samoa. A big portion of Samoa are the remittances that go there, because there's just a imbalance of way more imports than exports. Had some conversations, thought we came close to an opportunity there, but obviously it didn't work out. But the point being, going along with Tatimo's comment here, is there are some interesting opportunities that Polynesians can bring to the table just because of the unique cultural and financial integration that the Polynesian community bring together. And this was on full display on the Pacific Nations Championship, right? I mean, the Pacific Championships had basically got a huge jolt shot in the arm because of the Polynesian impact, and an impact from a small, when you look at the global percentage of population, nothing. I mean, Polynesians are like nothing. But when you look at the impact, it is off the charts, right? And so that's where a lot of this conversation is coming from. And it's really cool to see, really exciting. This is also somewhat related to punching above our weight. Is BYU still undefeated since our last podcast, right? I think they were 7-0, and they not only got to 8-0, but they got 9-0 on a, geez, what a crazy game. Again, the Holy War against Utah. Come to the last second, some controversial calls. It had everything, right? It had the hype. It had, the comeback. It had the controversial call, and then the last minute heroics to win the game. Really exciting to see BYU doing what they're doing. And there's a Polynesian coach. And traditionally, BYU has always had a, pipeline of Polynesian players. Same thing with Utah. So really, that's another area where well ahead of punching above our weight. But really exciting times for BYU football. to continue. They're still in the hunt for not only the Big 12 championship, but also the national championship runnings. And that's pretty exciting to have a head coach who's Polynesian not only win a major Power 5 conference championship, but also have a decent shot at the national championship at the collegiate level. That's pretty exciting. That's pretty cool stuff for me. And to see that a major impact on the culture on both teams, Utah and BYU, heavily Polynesian influence there. You know, you go to the BYU games, there's fire knife dancers, there's Polynesian entertainment. You look on the field, Polynesian players on the field. You look on the sideline, multiple Polynesian coaches there. It's just really awesome. Same thing, you see that at the University of Utah. See Polynesian coaches on the sideline there. Obviously, they've done a great job the last, I don't know, 20 years, 12 years, ever since they went into the Pac-12 in recruiting, winning championships, sending Polynesian players to the NFL. So a lot of really exciting things there. So that's kind of like the rundown of some of the major events that's happened since our live digital kava session. We're going to get into, if you want to call it more controversial, maybe, right? We're going to get into some interesting comments here. So let me start with a quick video here real quick. I don't know if you guys are aware, but there's been a lot of chitter chatter online going back and forth, social media. Apparently there was a Tongan young lady who got a malu tattoo. So I guess it's basically a Polynesian type of tattoo for women, but you know, we're Samoan for the malu. I guess it's Samoan based. And apparently there's a lot of controversy behind it, which is fair. I mean, it's not bad to have these discussions. We'll do this one video just real quick. It's a Steven Setu response to it, but we're not going to watch the whole video. I just wanted actually we'll just show the shot of it first. Let's bring it on stage here. So this is what was posted online. Was this video right here, real quick. So obviously, I mean, if you're familiar with the Samoan malu, it's kind of like dotted lines. It's kind of a cool little design. Can be on the hands, on the legs, and this woman here got it, but with obviously you can see the kupesi on there and Tongan kind of designs with it, and it led to a lot of controversy. One of the videos that maybe if I can find it here real quick was a response by so here's one. Let's there's this video. I don't know if we want to watch that one just yet, but let me see if I can find. There's right here. Let's watch. So this is another artist or tattooist, right? And he's saying that there's no such thing as a Tongan malu. Yeah, that it's all Samoan. So he's condemning the misuse of Samoa's sacred malu by other tattooists after a Tongan singer claimed to receive a Tongan malu. Sua warns against selling the sacred art and vows to protect Samoa's cultural heritage. So that's really what's the driver behind some of the comments here and the controversy. And this begs an interesting question, right? Because what they're saying is there's no such thing as a Tongan malu, which is probably correct, maybe. But the question then now becomes, well, was there or was there not? You know, Tongans kind of really we are proud of it, right? We're not ashamed of it or think that it's a bad thing. But we heavily embraced Christianity. And in that embrace of Christianity, those tattoos were one of the things that were shunned, right? And the shunning of the tattoos was out of, hey, saying, look, we are no longer, it's not that we're no longer going to practice it because it was whatever, bad, evil, or whatever. Maybe that was part of it, but it was more of to show our dedication and loyalty to Christianity. We are going to embrace Christianity and leave the resemblance of the old religion behind. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that necessarily is not necessarily tied to the old religion, quote unquote, but out of showing our dedication to Christianity, we let that go. That has pros, that has cons. Obviously, one of the cons are you lose some of those traditional aspects of the culture. So coming back to, first, if I remember correctly, the oldest tattoo kit in the world ever found was in Tonga. Okay, and it's heavily documented that Tongans had tattooing. Obviously, that was, we've left that behind. We've moved on. There's an effort to revive that in our culture today. Great. I don't have anything against it. I think in one of our earlier episodes with Mr. Atearoa, we discussed about it, and I'm like, hey, that's cool. If people want to revive it, want to make that something that comes back, hey, good for them. Is it at the top of my preferences of what's most valuable in the Polynesian culture to restore? No, not necessarily. But there's a couple interesting things. We'll watch two videos from one, if you want to call him I don't know if he's an influencer or content creator, but he has a couple videos. And then there's another gentleman who did a PhD on tattooing. He has an interesting perspective on it and even references Devita Fale's position and information regarding astronomy and how it could be tied to Tongan tattooing styles in the past. But let me pull this up first, and then we'll drive into it and kind of see some of the feedback and the ideas that come out of here. All right, let's bring this back to the stage.
Hello, everyone. Okay, I wanted to clarify my previous video because based on the comments and stuff, I can see a lot of people are misunderstanding my post. I've never stated that Tongans have malu. I've stated that Tongans have something similar to the malu. I've also stated that Tongans never had be'a, but Tongans have something similar to the be'a. Okay, so those are two different things. You have to kind of see it from that perspective. Okay, we do have a name for the be'a right now, which is called a tawaka. But if you go to Old Tongan history, and when the explorers came in oral tradition, if you go ask the Tongans and stuff, what was the tawaka before or back in the, let's say, 17th, 18th, 19th century? It was never called a tawaka. The tawaka was a term given by Su'asuluape when he performed the tatau on our Tongan men. And he was teaching the Tongan tufungas how to perform the whole tatau ceremony and stuff. Okay? What we do have in Tongan records is the description of, let's say, the malu-like pattern and also the be'a-like pattern. And that's what we have. There's nowhere you can find in Tongan history that stated the be'a for the Tongans is called the tawaka. You can't find it. It was given by the Samoan tufungas. So that's the clarification on that. Okay. I wanted to touch on something else too. Okay, so I think this will be a cool example. Talofa is short for Si'o Talofat. So Talofa is how you say hello in Samoa. Maloelele is how you say hello in Tonga. If you look in Tongan history on William Mariner's book, he never stated that the word maloelele was used for greeting. You know, he stated that Tongans, or at least the chiefs, referred to him with a phrase, "Si'o to'ofa," or "Si'o to'ofa." And you can see that "Si'o to'ofa" and "Si'o ta'alofa" sound similar. Okay, they're not the same exact thing, but they sound similar. That's what I was doing with the whole tatao thing. We have something similar to the pe'a and the malo. We just don't have the name. We only have the description.
So he brings up a couple interesting things, right? I mean, obviously, this is pretty documented history. There are drawings showing Tongans with a type tattoos, and apparently same thing with the women having a malu similar type of the tattoo structure and setup there. And so the question that arises is, so what does that mean? What is the relationship of Tonga and Samoa as they are through history, right? And I think something that is really important for us to recognize, and the first time I heard this was from this idea years ago, that I'm going to express here, is from Tevita Fare, right? So now Tonga and Samoa are different countries, right? So yeah, we got a comment here real quick. Yeah, I mean, if you want to call it a mistake, right? That's the closest thing you're gonna refer to. As we speak to each other, we try to use terms. So Tatimoa says, so her mistake was using the Malu name. Yeah, I think if you want to call it a mistake, yeah. But as the gentleman showed, our traditional way of saying hello or greeting is Siota Ofa, right? And then in the Samoan is Siota Alofa or something of that sort, right? So there's a good chance that the traditional Tongan name for that design could have been something near to Malu. It's just that now it is purely associated with Samoa because Tonga moved on from tattoos as a token of our full embrace of Christianity, right? And so when you have that type of switch, this is, and I guess it's related when we look, every culture, every way of thinking, every behavior has pros and cons. And we'll kind of tie it to our earlier thing on the Red Sea, right? And the Matematonga movement that is just causing tsunamis after tsunami of influence in the rugby league international stage and in the game over in domestic competitions around the world. And what is that? The ability to unite under a single cause and to fully embrace it. That's what the red wave is. The red wave, or the Red Sea, the Matematonga Red Sea, is you shrink it down to one thing. The only reason why you can punch above your weight is that you can consolidate and unify behind one cause. Because when you look at it in its totality, we're nothing. But it's our ability to be unified and to move in synchrony that allows us to punch above our weight. Right? Now we take that same thing that gives us that big benefit is what happened with tattooing. Our embrace of Christianity and our dedication to show our loyalty and our willingness to embrace the Savior and his gospel, we said we're leaving everything behind. I'm not saying it was right. I'm not saying it was wrong. This is something that seems to be ingrained in our culture. Whatever side of the fence you're on, there's pros and cons. This is what may have happened with the term Malu. It probably existed. It is documented that Tongan women had it. Tongan men had pe'a type things, but that was all left behind. And we didn't practice it for generations. So can we say, oh, was that her mistake to use the term? Well, maybe in theory, if you live in a environment that we live in and your perspective is that's cultural appropriation, if you want to use that term, because Malu is Samoan and that's where we only saw it. Well, yeah, in the last 50, 60 years, yeah, that's probably correct. But if you want to expand your view, you want to elevate your perception, or you want to dig in deeper into the details, the similar designs found in Tonga were probably called Malu too at some point. But people want to, we want to jump to conclusions. We want to, draw lines and divide. Okay, that has pros and cons as well. For me, I prefer not doing that. I think being more unified, being more aligned brings way more benefits than negatives. And so that, in theory, was the mistake there, Tatimoa. Hopefully that answers the question. So in speaking with Tevita Fale, the founder of the Polynesian Eyes Foundation, and all the history that he was able to uncover, I asked the question, what's the difference between Tonga and Samoa? And Tevita Fale says there is no difference. That's like saying Texas versus California. Yeah, they're different states, but they were the same country. There was no, this is where we come back to the idea, and I know a lot of people didn't like it online when we say these phrases. The idea of Samoa as an independent nation never existed until colonization. The idea of Fiji as an independent nation didn't exist until colonization. That is also true of all of Polynesia, because from our perspective, all of Polynesia was one country. That's our perspective. Right, wrong, indifferent, whatever anyone else thinks, you can feel free to think what you think. We were not there. We're here. Right? But we're trying to look back and look at the evidence and some of the hints. I take the perspective that Polynesia was at some point a unified nation that has shared a capital, that shared a similar government, a similar religious practice and belief. We also shared a similar economic system. We also shared very similar language, the same language. That's the reason why I believe those things. Now, with the injection of colonization, portions of the Polynesian nation start being broken off, right? Samoa, you break off the Cook Islands, Wallis and Futuna, right? All these things are broken up. And the European perspective is some of those were between different nations. So they started to say, okay, our portion of the Polynesian nation is going to be called X. Your portion will be called Y. And so lines started to be drawn, right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm just saying that's what happened. As that happens over generation, yes, the perceptions of a gap of individuality, yes, it exists. But in reality, that is no different from one village just arguing with another village. We're all the same people. We have very similar language, very similar cultural backgrounds, and obviously a lot of history. So the truth is, Tonga and Samoa were one nation. There was no Tonga, there was no Samoa. It was whatever the Tu'i Tonga, if you wanted to come up with a name, Pureanga, whatever you want to call it, realm, empire, pick a word. The point is, it was a collective unit that shared political, scientific, social, religious, and cultural DNA. And I want to show a video here. This gentleman, we've shared a couple of them in the past, and he touches on the same concept here. So we're going to play this real quick.
Clearly, there's a massive link between Tonga and Samoa. We were never separated. These flags, and as beautiful as they are, they actually act to divide us a lot more. Yeah. You're Tonga, we're Samoan. This is our flag, that's your flag. But the history is this. Yeah. The history is us this all the time. Intermarriage, culture-wise, navigation-wise, both together in Fiji, building boats for Tonga. It's crazy. That's what we have to be about. It's all one community. Watch the way you talk to your family.
And that I think is an important concept, right? Is the reality is we were all one nation, we're all one people. And the reality is, yes, there was colonization and there were some lines drawn, a little bit of separation in the culture as we kind of were separated. We kind of developed unique aspects of each other and how we behave, how we perceive, how we language adapts and changes, cultural practices adapt and change. So those things change over time. So that's something that I thought was kind of interesting, that there's been so many generations of that separation that now we start nitpicking on some of these things, where in reality, if we dig in a little bit deeper, we say there's only Malu in Ha'amoa, but we look at everything else and how intertwined Tuitonga was marrying multiple times, and not just the Tuitonga, but Tongan chiefs were marrying to Samoa and all the time. The Tuitonga was living in Ha'amoa for at least 5 generations at sometimes consecutively. There's obviously a lot of that. So there, I mean, it's kind of silly to start drawing lines and say, Malu was only Ha'amoa. It could be not, but I'm just saying, looking at the European observations and documentation from before Tonga kind of outlawed tattooing, and how our languages and how we interacted so closely, there's a real good chance it could have been. Not only did we practice it, that's kind of undeniable, but there's a real good chance with the similarities of the language, it could have been called Malu as well. So just some food for thought there. Hey, Clyde Moore, welcome. Appreciate you stopping by. Absolutely. Fefe Hakakautama Malo, Clyde Moore, another day in paradise. It's been a while since we had an episode here, so had to get it in. Been traveling quite a bit. I've been in the Midwest for about a week and a half, and then just work and a lot of things going on. So great to be back online and to get in touch with the community here. So that's what we got on the Malu situation there. So there were some notes that I took on a comment that was shared on Facebook, but I was not able to really draw into it online to find the details. But what I did do was I took screenshots of it. Let me see here. A window, and the one I want to share is this one. So there's a gentleman by the name of Sunny Nathanielu. He's some type of a cultural consultant. Looks like he's done some research. Maybe he's an academic here. I know we give academics a hard time, but we also recognize they add some value, right? The right medicine, the right dosage of a poison becomes medicine. So we're gonna read through his comments here real quick, and just kind of walk through it. So, and it is related to the Polynesian Eyes podcast, because he is going to reference Devita Fale's work here. So we'll start with the Tongan Malu. I'm not going to address who said what and respond to the various views on social media, because those sorts of conversations should not happen online, but should be personal, face-to-face, and away from the public gaze. And the topic of the Tongan Malu is quite complex. It deserves a huge essay talanoa in its own right. But for the sake of brevity and to give a simple response, I'm going to provoke the conversation by saying two things. Thing number one, when discussing culture, custom, and tradition, it is important to remember that the national boundaries we have today are relatively new. Samoa, Tonga, Cook Island, Niue, etc. are relatively new concepts and are new ways of framing and naming among us. Kind of like what we were kind of discussing earlier, right? These names for the islands are not ethnic, nor cultural, nor historical boundaries. They are national boundaries, predicated on a narrow colonial view of nations and nationalism. For example, the 15 islands of the Cook Islands is a national boundary. that has no history and no cultural anchors. Once again, this is all because of colonization and divvying up the pie, right? In fact, the two northernmost islands, Puka Puka and Tongarewa, Reva, are Samoan linguistically and historically, then they are Rarotongan. But they are considered nationally to be Cook Island. These national boundaries are not the way we saw ourselves, but the way colonists wanted to break us up. And when we say want, I don't think they were out there to break us up. This is just pure territorial dispute, right? This is just the nature of war, of conquering, and so forth. Polynesians would have done it if anyone else did it. Right? Whoever has power. I mean, here's a prime example. I'm pretty sure not everyone lined up to, swear their allegiance to Kamehameha. Kamehameha had to go and battle it out to force the Hawaiian Islands to be unified under him. Right? They didn't all line up and say, yeah, we want to be a unified Hawaiian nation. No, Kamehameha had to enforce that. And that was just the nature of the culture and the environment at that time. Colonists wanted to break us up for themselves. For thousands of years before these national boundaries were historically, culturally, ancestrally, genealogically one people, and names of islands were named after groups of families, not nations, 100%, or races of people. So historically, when a Tongan wanted to get a tatau, they would travel to Samoa to get it. They didn't go to get a Samoan tatau. They went to get a tatau because historically, culturally, ancestrally, genetically, it was theirs as well. It was ours. They went to their cousin's place to get a tatau. The Tongan tatau of today exists as a relatively new expression of Tonganness, but historically, Tongans would sail to Samoa to get a tatau. Historically, culturally, ancestrally, genealogically, it belonged to all of us in the Pacific. Okay? And I agree with this 100%. The best way to envision this is whatever island you grew up on, or even country you grew up in, it is one village to the next village, one town to the next town, one city to the next city. And everyone knows certain cities are known for doing certain things really well, right? Because it consolidates. There's a reason why there's Silicon Valley in California, and California has a certain aura in startups and Google, Facebook, all these massive things. They kind of come from there because it's coalesced into that culture, and that's what they're known for. You come to Texas, you're kind of known for thinking big. Everything's bigger, open space, small government, energy, cowboys, right? There's a certain within that, even though it's the same country, all Americans, but each village, same thing when growing up in Tonga, right? Each village was known for certain things. Certain villages were really good at a specific dance. Certain villages were really good at a specific crop. And it was, that doesn't mean that, haakame and their manioc and stuff, that's only haakame things. Like, no, there's certain things you wanted, you went to certain places. This is also true of the Polynesian nation. If you wanted a tattoo, could you have gotten a tattoo on Tongatapu? Probably. But if you wanted the high-end tattoo, that was a specialty that was in Samoa, it sounds like. So that's where everyone went. It wasn't, I'm going to the foreign nation of Samoa. No, think of it as going from your village to the village of Samoa to get your tattoo, because that was something that they provided. Thing number 2. So now consider this. 2 images of Malu taken from the internet, and I have highlighted in blue the 2 motifs to look at. And the other image is of a stone structure in Tonga called Ha'amonga a Maui. This I learned from, obviously, Te Vita Fale, an oral traditions historian from Tonga. On the crossbeam is etched these 2 images of celestial movements and constellations. We've kind of talked on this, walked through it. We go through Te Vita Fale's, Te Vita Fale's founder of the Polynesian Eyes Foundation. That's where we get the name from. That's where the logo comes from. It is Te Vita Fale's work. So here is a tattoo right here of the Malu. Okay. And what he's specifically referencing is this pattern, the double V pattern that's shown here. Okay. And when you slide down even further, see this? This is a kind of like a star based design. Right? So he's going to make an interesting connection here. Then there's the Ha'amonga. So what he was referring to is at the top of the Ha'amonga used to be an etching on the top of it. And what was the etching that was on the top of the Ha'amonga? It was the double V. Okay. This is a critical concept to understand navigation and seasons. So, in a sense, this has the two solstices tied into it, right? This is, if you could view it as this is the equator, this is the two tropics on the top at the bottom. In the middle of the year, 50-50 split on the sun, other equinoxes, different times, different locations. So that's what he's referring to. And so you see the double V here that was etched on top of the Ha'amonga is the same double V, and you can kind of see it right here, right? That's the double V pattern you're seeing also in the Malu. And then the fact that it kind of represents stars and movements of the celestial bodies is another evidence of this. See? This is a constellation map, and you have the double V here, the equator cutting the earth into east and west, also north and south, right? And you have the double V, you have the Toloa constellation in the middle right there, which is also tied to the Ha'amonga constellation. The Ha'amonga cuts to the north and to the south of the earth. This is all intertwined knowledge. So, if you want to zoom in and you want to focus on only the last 50 years, correct. Malu is Samoan because that's who has maintained it the most. You want to zoom out to the Polynesian nation history over thousands of years, the young Tongan lady probably has as much claim as the Ha'amoa young lady or girl to have it in there. It's documented. So, interesting. So, do those Malu patterns belong to Samoa, especially when other Pacific nations have the same patterns in their lore? We should stop thinking of ourselves through a divisive colonial lens. And that's, we can't help that, right? It just happens. It's just a product of our time. If we only look through our experience in our lifetime, okay. But if you want to have a more expansive perspective and look at the Polynesian nation as it stood for thousands of years under Tangaloa, under the Tu'itonga, it changes your perspective significantly, because now the data allows you to say, hey, look, this Tongan singer, okay. You can argue about how, when, why she did it, but you can't say she's totally out of bounds. She's out of bounds if you only want to look through the last 50, 60, 70 years. You go beyond that, you're like, oh, maybe it's not that big of a deal after all. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm, obviously I have Samoan blood and Fijian blood, but I grew up in Tonga. Maybe I'm a little more dismissive of it because of that. Who knows? Coming back here, perhaps before calling anything ours, theirs, or mine, look back to its proper origins and not the recent or colonial past. We had a history long before the European exploration, and we should lean on that history. That's one of the goals of this podcast, is to really expand. We want to talk about current events. We want to talk about everything, right? But one of the overlying themes is to really understand that as Polynesians, there is something that we have as a group that is special, that is unique, that we should strive to keep and to maintain and to even reinforce. And we can see some of those benefits by watching how we behave independently, like the Red Sea, and look at how it impacts the international game of rugby league and the economics of Australia and New Zealand. Now imagine as a Polynesian nation, what that could be and what impact that could have on the whole world as well. It's kind of cool to think about. One of the most profound findings in my PhD on the Tatao was the original Malu traditional star map using for navigating the Moana. And it was something all the people of the Pacific used, not just Samoans. But that's another discussion for another time. So I've never heard that before. That's interesting. When you make the connections of the design, right, to the heavens, to the Ha'amonga, and to the celestial movements of the bodies and how it was etched as discovered and as taught by Tevita Fale. This is obviously from his Polynesian astronomy book. That it also is directly related to the movement of the celestial bodies, the stars. And that's what he's kind of inferring there. Very interesting, very powerful possibilities there. Thought that was very something that would be worthwhile to discuss, bring up here on the podcast. And with that being said, I think we're going to call that an episode, everyone. We have gotten multiple messages, right? People have been asking for looks like here Tatimo Tonga and Tokelau flipped in that picture. Yes. So that's an interesting question, Tatimo, and this is very important. Okay, we'll get into it. I'm glad you asked that question. It's not always brought up, but I'm glad you saw that, Tatimo, and it is by design. So Tevita Fale has expressed that the cardinal primary, so the Western perspective is north is always up, right? Which is in theory true when we look at the cosmic view of things. But in Polynesian perspective, south was up, meaning south was the primary direction. And it is south. That's why Tonga is, quote unquote, on the top of the page. That is one of the evidences that we push towards, because some people say, oh, Ha'amoa is the center of the Polynesian nation, and that's where it originated, is because, you have Tonga to the south of Ha'amoa, and then you have Tokelau, slightly north of Ha'amoa, so Samoa was the center. That's one way to look at it. From the Polynesian Eyes perspective on this podcast is actually south was the cardinal direction, and that everything was referenced from south and spread out because Tonga was the center. Tonga was the capital of the Polynesian nation. We've discussed this multiple times. That was one of the potential topics we were going to run into, was a breakdown on the Tu'imanua idea, which I think is, for all intents and purposes, the Tu'imanua seems to be a sibling of the Tu'itonga. All archaeological evidence shows that it's much younger than the Tu'itonga, but that's where a lot of people point to say that Samoa was the origin of the Polynesian civilization. But to answer your question there, that's why it's flipped. So from the Polynesian navigation, Tonga is the primary direction, and that's why it's flipped. Everything else is in reference to Tonga. Tonga Tapu, was the southernmost sacred point within the Polynesian nation, right? So, you could say the Polynesian Triangle goes to New Zealand. New Zealand is a young settlement in the Polynesian Eyes. So that's the primary reason why Tatimoa, that Tonga and Tokelau are flipped. It's because of that. Whether that was done for political reasons or whether that was done, towards the end, this is something that's very challenging. Some people don't understand that. That's one of the many things that Tevita Fale has brought back to the table in regards to celestial movements of the stars and also the proper way to perceive navigation through the Polynesian lens. So you'll find this same double V. This it's actually really this is not just on the Malu. This double V is found in the Taumafakava, in the Furitaunga, and Furitaunga literally means the reflecting of the celestial bodies on the ground. And the Furitaunga was the name of the kava ceremony for the Tuitonga. When Laufiritonga installed a kava ceremony for the Tupo family, Tupo the first, he gave Tupo the first the Taumafakava ceremony. And that is also a representation of the heavenly bodies. So the Taumafakava also is tied to this design. The kava Maui kava bowl is tied to this design. There's a reason why the Maui kava bowl only has 4 legs, and it's tied to these 4 portions here. And you can see the design. Also, the kadia was based off of this design. I mean, our culture was heavily embedded with this knowledge. And when we look at the Malu, this is one of the ways in which our cousins in Ha'amoa preserve that knowledge. They don't understand it and don't see it, but that's what this is. So a couple more comments here. Toko, that same guy on the podcast, said Ha'amoa is south of Ha'apai and Vava. Well, that's interesting, Slick Rick. I don't know exactly what that means to him. And to mean Ha'amoa is south of Ha'apai. Obviously, if you're looking from it from what direction, I don't know. So, and claim that there was no Tonga. Well, Tonga Tapu has always existed, and there's a reason why Tangaloa and the Tuitonga resided on Tonga Tapu from our perspective, Slick Rick. So interesting. Everyone has different ideas. Everyone has different concepts. Just thought it was something interesting to bring up here for us to discuss. Really appreciate everyone joining in from Facebook, from YouTube, and on X. We're gonna, I know a lot of people have asked once again, can we get a schedule? This is why we don't commit to a schedule just yet on our lives. We do take all of our lives and convert it into our podcast on YouTube, and we do upload it onto Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts. So those are areas that you can access the podcasts in there. We do have an interview that we need to edit. I've been meaning to edit with Ikan Samani. Need to get to. We also have an interview today that will be recorded, and then we'll send that out. But really appreciate it. Glad to be back. Glad to be able to connect with the community here. Super excited to continue our journey. A lot of exciting things as a people. Polynesians bring a lot to the table. We're excited to highlight that. We're excited to discuss the history and to bring those conversations to the front. With that being said, as always, we encourage everyone, stay curious, be bold, and don't be afraid to ask the important questions. And until next time, peace.